Hello everyone, my name is Billy, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about Azure Functions. Azure Functions is Microsoft's serverless offering. And in this video I want to just quickly go over what is serverless and kind of show you the setup environment and maybe to dive into the code a little bit, just to see if you want to invest your resources at your company into developing your serverless architecture with Azure Functions. So this will be a quick introduction into it, and my next video I will cover an example of how to actually use the Azure Functions in a real world app. So when I think of serverless, I think of something that's a little bit further beyond from a platform as a service, such as Azure App Service, where you don't really have to maintain your Windows updates or your version of your OS. All of that is kind of abstracted away from you already. For serverless, it comes down to something called triggers and bindings. That's where you kind of program against. So your idea is, rather than say a technology like an ASP.NET core, you program against like a HTTP trigger or a queue trigger or a service bus trigger or a blob trigger, which I will all kind of dive into a little bit more into the documentation, but it's kind of like the general idea of what you want to think about. And the second thing is the pricing. So the pricing is key. So the pricing is where does it say here, as a pay-as-you-go pricing model. So rather than paying for your entire service uptime, you pay for like the triggers and bindings, right? You pay for a request. And this is a very key distinction to kind of know whether or not you want to kind of go about this. If you require a server to be up at all times, and obviously this isn't the right thing, but if you require like a job to be done every hour, then that's good. If you require an email processor, then that's a great example. If you require some kind of transformation of your data at a trigger of some kind of event, then that's also a good scenario to use. So it's kind of a general idea where you want to go into. I'm going to now go into documentation, so you can, where they show like a pretty good example of how to set it up, and it'll kind of dive into like the different triggers. So you can kind of see already they have show you like different triggers here, but I will kind of dive into how to set up the Visual Studio Code right now. Let's change our screen a bit. First, I have prepared, look at this, a split screen of the browser and Visual Studio. So let's get started in the Visual Studio Code setup. And I'm going to give you guys the quick TLDR of all of this. So skip all this. This. Okay, first thing you want to do is install Visual Studio Code. Obviously, I have it on ready. If you don't, click this and click download, follow all the install steps. And this, the next documentation covers, so you don't need to worry about that. And I'm going to be working C#, so I will be using this extension here. And to install extensions, you click this little one here, and then you type C#. And this is the extension. Oops, sorry. This is the extension. Make sure the icons match. It's the one with the 11 million downloads, so you'll know it's valid when you see it. And then the one after this, we will also be covering in the next documentation, so don't need to worry about this. This is the CLI tool, so when you run .NET anything, this will actually return some valid information. Okay. This you can set up later with your Azure subscription and everything like that. Like, you want to kind of just dive into whether or not you like the technology before you actually committing to creating an account and all this. Install extension. Okay, so next thing is Azure Functions extension. Okay, so this, so you can kind of open it in code and it will just pop up here. Okay, or alternatively, you can, instead of doing that, you can just click this and search, and it will show that same thing. So you just click install, like they said, and give it some time to install everything. And once that is done, you probably have to restart Visual Studio Code, but all of this stuff will be covered in the next video, like how to create everything. Yeah, so the next one will be shown in this documentation here. So let's dive into this one next. Work with Azure Functions core tools. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got here. So core tool version. So Azure Functions had version 1, which ran on .NET Framework, and version 2, which runs on Core. You can see here the supported language is .NET Framework 4.7, and now it's going on Core 2, and same with the JavaScript. Node 10 is supported now, and earlier it was Node 6. These other languages, I highly recommend you don't use them in production because they are in preview. So just keep that in mind, that if you're going to work with Azure Functions, stick with JavaScript or stick with the C# or F# language. All right. But in my examples, I'll be showing you the C# example. So let's go down to working with 2.0. First thing you need, obviously the SDK. You want to download Core 2.2 or whatever version of Core is currently available for you. You might have 3.0, so click Core SDK, download that, follow install process. At the end of this whole steps, you might want to restart your computer just so make sure you have everything, all the surfaces up and running. Next thing you want to do is install Node.js. You can click this, and you'll see that kind of takes you to somewhere not that useful. So what I would recommend instead is you just go to Google and go Node.js, and then click that first link to nodejs.org and click the 10.15 or whatever version and install that. Follow the steps, walk through it. And once you get up to here, at this point, you might have to restart your computer. Maybe you won't, but what you'll want to do next is use npm, which comes with Node, so Node Package Manager, and then just install this. So just get that started over here. So npm install, and then this is global. So this Azure Functions core tool will then be globally available, so that when you run func, this action right here, that will basically be because it is globally installed instead of so when you move outside of your directory, it will still be available to you. Okay, so mine installed quickly because I already had it on my computer. So let's clear this away. Just gonna go to root directory and just kind of clear some of this stuff up now. Okay. So next thing, Mac OS, don't need to do this. Linux, we don't need to do this. Obviously, if you are on the Linux or Mac, follow these steps. So next thing is create a local function project. So right now, I have nothing in my root directory, which is called C# learning. So let's make a func in it, and let's call it first functions app. Okay, that will just create some of the files. So here you can see, choose your language. I'm going to choose .NET, and we're just going to keep scrolling along as we kind of see fit. And then it's going to tell you that these are the files that are going to get created. So first function app, and then you can see in here I have a Visual Studio Code a file because we're in Visual Studio Code, a git ignore, the CS proj, host file, and local settings. You can add some of these extensions. So this is a C# script file. I recommend you don't do this if this is your first Azure Function app. You just stick with the CS proj. And there's some Docker support and all this other stuff I will cover in a later video. And you can see here that to kind of give a little description of what a CSX project is. So C# script file. Okay, register extensions. So extensions are kind of like alias for NuGet. I assume they call it extensions because of Node developers, and this isn't going to primarily be a C# tool. This is going to be for Python and Java and everything, so they kind of forgo the NuGet. But this is for NuGet, installing your NuGet packages. So just keep that in mind. So you can see here, like func install package. This, just Google. You can see this is a NuGet package. Okay. We're not going to install that because as we kind of add different triggers, it will actually automatically install the different packages for us, which is kind of a nice thing. So local settings. So this right here is your local config. You can have your connection strings, the host you want your Azure Functions to run on, and a whole bunch of different stuff. So locally right now, it has your storage account, and it has the language you are running on. Okay. We're not going to add to any of these for now, but you can read the description here if you really want to know the more details. So next thing, get your storage account connection string. Okay, so this part right here, I'm going to kind of get a quick explanation of what and why. So when you're running Azure Functions, all your binaries and everything and artifacts and whatever you want to call it, they'll be stored somewhere. And where they're going to be stored is going to be on your blob storage. So when you're running locally, your files are going to be stored on your file system. But once you deploy it, all those files are actually going to be on your storage account. So right here, Azure Web Job Storage. This is very important to keep this here. And this use development storage true means that you're going to point to your local emulator. So what they're telling you to do here is basically go online, make an account, download Storage Explorer. So this is what you do want to do. Okay, so download this free Storage Explorer, and this will come with an emulator. And as soon as you download it, I already have it downloaded, so this is what it looks like. You'll probably get something like this. And then what you want to do is also in your Windows, you want to type emulator, right? And you want to actually run Microsoft Azure Storage Emulator. Okay, so click that and it'll kind of start the emulator. If you don't start this, when you navigate into your blob stuff, it actually will just spin for forever, basically. So I will do this. I already had one earlier, so I'm actually going to delete this so that you guys can see. But that will be basically created as soon as you start running your Azure Functions. Okay. So that is what all of this part is about. And remember, this points to your local emulator. So all right, and then here, create new function. So this func new, once you navigate inside of your function app, you go func new, and it will give you a list of the different triggers you're allowed to use. In their example, they created a queue trigger. So I'm gonna create a HTTP trigger just to kind of show you guys a little bit more detail, because the queue trigger kind of just produces a log file. So this one actually creates a little bit more detail, and you can kind of interact with it a bit more. So I'm going to call it first HTTP trigger. Okay, and then I'm going to close this local settings. I'm going to create, so the file is created, and then if you open your navigation, you can see first HTTP trigger. Also, I'm just pressing Control B just to pop this part up in case you guys didn't know. So first HTTP trigger. And then you can see a whole bunch of stuff here, right? So I'm going to just kind of organize it in a nicer way so you guys can kind of see. My C# seems to have crashed on me, so I'm just gonna save that. Okay, there you go. So the first thing you'll see is that there's going to be a attribute, and this is going to be common between all the different Azure functions you do. So there's always going to be a HTTP trigger or a queue trigger or a SendGrid trigger or some kind of triggers. So this attribute will always decorate the message that it is around. So this is how you access the content of the trigger. So, and then there'll always be a Azure function name up top too. So this is produced when you create your name. All right. And one file can also have multiple ones. You don't actually need one-to-one. Obviously call it 2 and then call it run2, and then you'll have no problem here, right? Let's up a bit. Okay, so initially right now, what you can see is you have, for HTTP triggers at least, you'll have a authorization level. So authorization level, let's see if IntelliSense works. Perfect. You'll have function, anonymous, admin, system, and users. These are just the access levels that allows you to kind of access this HTTP. And I believe in this little description down below, they will mention that, yep, important right here. So you'll see that they'll say that authentication will basically be disabled for local. So run locally, authentication is enforced. And HTTP endpoints, all requests are basically handled as anonymous, okay? So just keep that in mind that they will all be anonymous. All right, so we have this authentication level, then you can set the verbs that you want, the get, post, and then you can specify the route. And then what this will do actually, it will write to a log file. It will grab name from query, and then it will basically deserialize the name, and then it will either display hello with the name, or it will display please pass name on the query string, blah, 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 okay? So as soon as we run this, we will actually try to test this out and kind of mess with it a bit. Right now, scroll down. So there's like aliases and shortcuts. You can go func new template, blah, blah, blah. But instead of remembering all the commands, you can just type this and then kind of just follow through with all the different options, okay? So run locally. So let's start. Let's actually run this HTTP trigger. So func host start. Okay, just give it a second. And it should be good to go. Perfect. And then you'll see this Azure Functions, and then it'll print out the URL that you need to access this. Remember, port, API, and then the name of your Azure Functions is the default. So let's actually just put this here. So if I put this here and I don't put the name param, it should say please pass name, right? And then if I pass name, and then I say name is Billy, then it says hello Billy, right? So that's very simple. And I just want to quickly just dive a little bit into the details and nuances of this. So I am just going to modify this real quick. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to actually, who are you? And then I'm going to actually go name the param, right? And just show you guys how you can kind of cut, oops, sorry, wrong way. And then show you guys that you can actually use query parameters. This, and then so because I already declared a name, it will just do that. So now my URL will be who are you / name. So let's run this again and see if that worked. Okay, perfect. So now let's take this URL and kind of just do one of these and go Billy here, right? And the results should be the same, Billy, perfect. So let's now actually get it to a point where we can debug in Visual Studio Code. So this documentation actually doesn't show you how to actually get it so you can debug in Visual Studio Code. You kind of just have to do a bit of Googling yourself or whatever, but I'm just going to show you how to do it. So I'm going to first remove the debugger, and then we're going to cancel this. Okay, so you're going to see that you're learning first function app, and that's going to be important because you're under first function app. Okay, and I'm just going to press Ctrl+Shift+B, which will trigger Visual Studio Code to say create a task file, and you want to do .NET Core, and then it'll create a .NET Core task file here, right? And then if you Ctrl+Shift+B again, you're gonna run build, and then it's gonna be like kind of die on you because it doesn't know what's really going on. That's because Visual Studio Code has an idea called working directory, and based on your working directory, it will look for CS projects, look for solutions, and kind of resolve how you want to do your debugging, right? So refresh this, now you see a task. So this task.json, you actually want to move it underneath under your projects, okay? And then I'm going to delete this root one here. And now you kind of expect it to kind of just be smart and be able to kind of trace into it. But if you run the build again, it actually won't know what's going on. It's going to think you don't have a task.json file again, right? So what you're going to have to do is you're going to go file, you're going to add a folder to working directory, and then we're going to go learning, and we're going to point our directory to here, right? So that will basically change our working directory to the one that you are with, and you can remove this old one right here. Remove from here, right? Alternatively, what you could do, which I prefer to do because of this whole directory nonsense, okay, so personally, I like to do this where I go code and dot. Okay, so this will open up your directory in the same fashion that this will also work in directory. Okay, so personal preference up to you, but I'm just going to continue on from this video, and you're going to see that you're going to have a build now, but you're going to be missing a bunch of different stuff. So instead of me just kind of troubleshooting through all of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just copy and paste a file in here, and we'll kind of just solve all of our problems magically, because I kind of don't want you guys to waste your time trying to debug and troubleshoot all of this stuff. So I'm just going to save your time and just some voodoo magic, and I will put this on GitHub so that you guys can have it. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste. Okay, that way, and now you're gonna have a bunch of stuff. You're gonna have a clean, you're gonna have a build, you're gonna have a clean release, a publish, a func, all this stuff. Okay, so now when you do Control-Shift-B, you're going to see a bunch of output. You're going to see it build succeed. Right. Okay, perfect. And then when you go to your trigger now, and I set a debug point here, and I'm gonna run, close the task, I'm gonna run, you're gonna see a little trigger here up here, and you're gonna see that it's gonna start running. And then you're gonna see the same logo, the Azure Functions logo. Hey, now should be able to this. And look at this. So now you're actually in the debugging point, and then if we step down here, kind of just see what is name, and that name is Billy. Perfect. So that's how you kind of set up your local environment to debug. I know I kind of just cheated and just did it, but honestly, it's not worth your time when you're, especially when you're trying to learn how to set up your Visual Studio Code. So just copy my configs, put it on. If you want more detail on how to actually do it, you're probably just going to start like Googling your way through this. Okay. So let's go back to the documentation. So Funk host start. Scroll, we're done all this. Pass data to functions. Yep, so this is all of them just testing. And then this part, okay, so this was passing. Okay, yeah, this part is actually quite interesting to know about. So like we have a HTTP trigger, right? And let's say that we have a non-HTTP trigger. So let's create a new one. So func new. So let's create our queue trigger now. And also before I do that, I just want to show you guys something. So here you can see that there's packet to reference is only the net SDK when we actually create a queue. So first queue trigger, and then it adds the file. This will actually automatically add the NuGet package for us too. That. So Microsoft Azure Web Jobs Extension Storage is the NuGet package you actually need to run that. So that's a kind of a neat thing that they did. First queue trigger, so you can see here, queue is same thing. This down. So function name, queue trigger, right? Similar to HTTP trigger, right? And each one has its own little overloads that you can put in here. Connection, queue name, the value that's in the actual message itself, and then it'll actually just write to a log. Okay, so let's trigger this, but the first thing you have to do is you see the connection string is actually empty. So this is the Azure storage queue. So there's already one that we're using in the emulator, so we're just gonna take this value right here, go back here, we're just gonna paste that in here. So that's the so let me just show you on the storage emulator that will be utilized this right here. Okay, so how do we actually now write a message, a test message to that? So you can see here they say localhost port admin function then function name. So let's do the same thing. I'm going to put a debug here. I'm going to start it, and then we're going to kind of just construct a whole URL, give it the name, and then we're going to see and make sure that actually works. Okay, so function logo, then we're going to pop up a URL. Perfect. I'm going to copy this, probably just up to here. I'm going to replace this. So this is what we got. And then what did it say? It said function admin and then function name. So let's do that. And we're going to get this. Okay. So what we're doing here is we're doing a get. Actually, let me pop open Postman because that's kind of what I really wanted to do. So I'm going to see better. So let's do this. I'm going to paste the URL. Postman you can install for free. And if you haven't used Postman, make sure you learn how to use Postman. If you're going to be a web dev or anyone who works with any kind of API that's HTTP, this is kind of pivotal. All right, so you do a get, and you can kind of see the status, queue trigger, this is the connection string, and blah, 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 right? So that's kind of a good status that this is up and running, right? And then the next thing you want to do is send actual message here. So this trigger is based on messages in its inbox. So we're going to do a post, and this is going to be the content of the body. So do that. Change post, go change that to raw. We're going to paste that, and then we're going to actually add a header called content. type, and then we're going to go application JSON, and you'll know that kind of worked because the colors changed. And then we're going to go here and we'll go Bob and change the method to post. And as soon as we hit send, it should add it right here, and our debug should hit that. And look at that. And then you can kind of see my queue item, and you can see the message that we sent is Bob. Okay, I'm gonna just step through that. And now we're gonna go back to documentation. So that's how you kind of test other non-HTTP requests, okay? It's very important because you don't want to kind of have to like manually queue up a message and go through the whole process yourself, because it's just going to be very laborious. All right, so this part of documentation, it's referring to Azure Functions version 1. So like I said, if you're going to start net new here, ignore version 1 and just move forward with the newest. And then this is talks about logs. So this will be in your temp directory and then log files and everything. So if you don't know how to get to that, I will show you guys. So this was my directory where I put all the helpers. So what you're gonna do, there's a good shortcut to get to that, where you go percentage and you go temp and you kind of step through here, and then you go log files, and then you go application and functions. And then since I ran it already, it already created the whole folder directory. Okay, so that's where your log files will go to, if you're wondering. Publish to Azure. Like I said, if this is your first time looking at this, don't bother publishing to Azure yet. You just want to kind of test locally, make sure that this is actually something that fulfills your business needs. And I'll cover how to publish it and how to actually build a CI/CD system with your Azure Functions in a later video anyways. All right, so we can skip that, custom container deployment, same thing. Okay, so that's kind of like how you do the Visual Studio Code. Let's go back to our directory and I'll show you guys how to set up with Visual Studio now. You want to make sure you stop your Visual Studio Code app, and because once we make a Visual Studio one, their ports are going to conflict and you're going to wonder why it's not working. Okay, so make sure you stop this app first. So let's take a look inside this documentation first. I want to kind of just show you guys this first because it's up right in center, and this actually doesn't really contain much useful information in terms of getting started. And at the bottom, it actually doesn't link to the other one nicely like the Visual Studio Code one does. So what we're going to do is go back into code. We're going to scroll to the bottom of this. We're going to click this. And we're going to go to Visual Studio Development. So this one is actually way more useful than the original one, because I'll actually go through the prerequisites of what to install and everything. So this is Visual Studio Installer. So go Visual Studio and go to Installer. Okay, and in here, you're going to want to kind of follow their steps. There said Azure Development. Make sure you have all those checked off. I'm going to show you with Modify. Over and make sure that you have this checked off. And if you want to be more careful, go to individual components. You can go to Azure Development and just check off basically everything here just to make sure you cover it. And if you're not too concerned about memory on your computer, obviously. Okay, so do that, install that, and next thing you want to do is install the extension. I'm not sure in the later versions if it will automatically come with it, but in my current version, I had to install this separately. So I'll go to Tools, Extension, and this is the one you're going to want to find. So go to Online, you go to Azure Functions, and you're going to click this, and you're obviously going to click the Install button, okay? Make sure you get this one and not this one, because this one is created by Microsoft, and this one is by some dude, okay? So once you do that, you're basically ready to go. You should have a Core 2.2 and all the other stuff obviously installed as a prerequisite. They say to update everything. And yeah, you're basically ready to get started. So this is similar to earlier when you're doing the func init. But it's obviously more graphical. So I'm going to go first Azure Functions. Okay. And then here it gives you a nice little pop-up where you can choose what kind of trigger you want. I've already gone over the queue trigger already, so we're just going to go back to the HTTP trigger just so you can kind of see how to do this. Okay, and it gives you a nice little option here where you can choose emulator. If you were to choose this, you can actually choose emulator. Okay. Back to this, access rights. Oh, make sure you choose version 2. Okay, so .NET version 1, version 2. Use that, and it will create the project for you. Yep, they highlighted the same thing here. Okay. Same thing, go over the host files, goes over the local settings. Yep, talks about the web job storage solutions here. That's basically the same file, right? And adding functions to your project. Okay, so same thing here. You have this. You can set a debug. This is all your standard Visual Studio kind of functionalities here. I always put it down to just make it more readable. And then if you run, you can do the same thing where you hit this endpoint and then scoot that over, pop this up. It will print out the URL. You hit that endpoint, it will hit the debug point. Okay, there you go. Obviously, pass in name. Right. Pop that. Do the same thing. Obviously, you can change this to who am I slash name and string name. And it will work the same way. That. Right. Run this. Oh, sorry, didn't change this yet. Who am I slash right, it's here, and who am I, and then hello Billy. Okay. It's very simple. Now that you actually kind of see how this all works together, it's very the pattern is the same essentially, right? So adding a new function to your project. So we in Visual Studio Code we go func new. In Visual Studio you right click, similar to how you would normally do add a class, and then go function. Give this a name. So first queue trigger, and then it'll pop up all this. Click this. And then here you can actually enter your connection string that rather than adding it after the fact. I'm going to do that since I did not copy and paste it and I'm too lazy to type it. So same thing, it'll create exactly the same template. And obviously if you enter the connection string, it will put it here. Here, I'm going to go here, this, that, and this should all work exactly as it did earlier. Okay, let's see what else this has covered. This talks about basically the same thing, adding bindings, output bindings, and all that stuff. Oh, okay, so this is actually different that they talked about in this documentation and they didn't talk about in the other one. This is actually going to get a little bit more complex, so I will put it here for now and I'll just kind of explain what it is. And then in a later video, I will actually show you how to use these bindings. I think I might have copied and pasted something wrong, so I'm going to do this just so I can do that. Let's, oh right, it's complaining that I have to send a out. Okay, so let me kind of just quickly explain what this does and kind of what it means. So when I stated earlier that you have for serverless, you have triggers and you have bindings, you have your inputs and you have your outputs. So this you've seen in action where your message comes in. This is your output where it will send it to another queue. So imagine a mailbox where your message comes in here, you do some internal processing, and then you send that message out to another queue to kind of trigger its series of events. So you can kind of create a small atomic unit of compute that you can use to kind of chain together a large distributed compute system. Okay, so I'll go in more detail into this stuff when I actually show you an application example, but this is actually a great demonstration of how to use the bindings too, which I'm surprised that the Visual Studio Code one actually did not cover. Okay, And in here, just like a little table breakdown of all the different triggers that they offer. All right. Testing functions, like I said, you can do the admin portal, and then publishing, functions, app settings. Oh yeah, all the production apps and stuff like that. I'll show you when I actually build out an app and do the full deployment and set it all up, okay? All right. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you guys really learned something from this and were able to set up your development environment, especially your Visual Studio Code environment. My next video, I actually want to try to cover a real app, actually. So I'm thinking for the meantime, it's going to be a mail system. So going to have a queuing, no, I'll start with a storage queue trigger and a SendGrid binding, and also make maybe a SMTP version of that, just so in case you guys don't use SendGrid itself. And if you guys have any other ideas, let me know below, because I will probably be coming out with a video in either a week or two. So if no one's mentioned anything, that's what I will be making. All right, talk to you guys next time.